Royston, why don't you take it away?
So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever part of the world you're joining in from. I would love to say welcome to sunny Mumbai, but we've been having the most cloudy 3 days and torrential downpours and a cyclone that hit Mumbai yesterday. So we're having our fair share of rocking of the boat. I'm sure many of you have been watching with great concern some of the recent news coming out of India. And I think last year, no, year before last, when I was presenting at the UN, I talked about we are living in a VUCA world: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And then 2020 hit, and suddenly everything before that seemed extremely passive and mild compared to what we saw happening there. And in India and in some parts, I think Colombia and others, 2021 seems to be outdoing 2020, and not in a good way. So we are really sort of playing out that line which said that there are decades in which nothing happens, and then there are weeks in which decades happen. And literally, we're seeing tectonic shifts that are happening with the changes. Healthcare crisis snowballing into an economic crisis, and then sort of exploding into a humanitarian crisis. And some of the data coming out seems to indicate, 100 to 400 million people falling below poverty line across the world because of the impact of COVID. So taking out 2 decades of effort in the development sector. And we have sort of leading lights in the development sector on this call. So I can see Happy and Prabhat and so many of you that I may not recognize. And of course, Alex, who has led the way for so many of us on this call. So we're going to spend all the next 56 minutes really learning as much as we can from Alex and Prabhat in their interaction in a sort of fireside chat. And, really seeing how in the post-COVID world, if at all we reach there, but in the with-COVID world, how do we rebuild back better, stronger, cleaner, greener, and more inclusive? I think there are, as 2008 financial crisis taught us, leaders who say never waste a good crisis. And we seem to be in that same space right now. So what are the learnings that we can share there? I mean, we at Grameen Impact, which was started a couple of years before the COVID crisis, 10 years after we started Grameen Capital India, which was to bring mainstream capital for enterprises serving the poor, predominantly microfinance, and then expanded to the broader adjacent spaces of affordable health, affordable education, water, sanitation, clean energy, and pioneered these SDG impact bonds to be able to bring in different pools of capital. Alex talks about, the win-win-win approach of fundraising in one of the chapters in the book. And really, for us, the SDG impact bonds was a win-win-win because we brought in impact investors, social enterprises, and then outcome funders of philanthropic capital or CSR money to be able to really look at the same SDG goal with different risk perceptions, with different motivations, and with different lenses, but always with the same outcome in mind. And so, those were some of the work that we have done in Impact. It's traditionally taken about 3 years to do an impact bond. We committed that we will try and do it in 3 months. The classic, audacious style that we have. And we've done about 8 of them. So we've done a goal 5 women's empowerment impact bond, a goal 8 skilling and livelihood impact bond, a goal 2 agri and food security impact bond, the goal 7 green energy impact bond. We then did a COVID impact bond for reskilling of women artisans to make masks and sanitization products. We followed on with a second COVID impact bond. So it's been really, really a hectic 2 years in that front. And yet we know that we are sort of scratching the surface, but contributing our might towards that goal. And therefore, chapter 13, which talks about forging partnerships again, was again very enlightening for me because that really came through again very strongly as we build back along with COVID or post-COVID, the need to be able to, go shoulder to shoulder with others who have the same goals and same motivation, and therefore be catalytic in our approach, and really make every dollar count. So with that, Mr. Count, or Mr. Counts, over to you. How do we make every dollar count? How do we make every effort count? How do we make every single good heart, good mind, good conscience combination come together for the good of the world? Prabhat, can I invite you to, welcome Alex and then head off into the fireside chat? Prabhat is a long-standing colleague. He is the CEO of Grameen Foundation India. He's the CEO of Grameen Impact Ventures. He's really leading a lot of these new thoughts around technology interface with the bottom of the pyramid. And my friend and collaborator in crime, Prabhat, over to you.
Thank you, Royston. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Just a few words about Grameen Foundation India's work. So Grameen Foundation India was established about 11 years ago as a subsidiary of Grameen Foundation USA that Alex established and led for a long time. And of course, many of you would be aware, Grameen Foundation India started working on how to drive financial inclusion, microcredit, microfinance, but then expanded into more broader financial inclusion and digital financial services. And now we have also expanded into the spaces of promoting livelihoods, particularly focused on two strands. One is around, say, agriculture-based livelihoods, so working with farmer producer organizations, supporting smallholder farmers. And the other is around promoting self-employment opportunity, and women's economic empowerment. So yeah, as Grameen Foundation India, we build on the very, very rich legacy that Alex left behind, by setting up Grameen Foundation and working on really innovative and cutting edge things, as I was reading the book, How to Change the World Without Losing Your Mind, which talks about it's almost like an autobiographical sketch, but it is about every chapter, every almost sentence in the book is about some snippets, some insights, some ideas around for leaders and people in the social impact sector to kind of to focus on. Ever since I read the first edition of the book, and now of course the second edition is getting launched today. Alex, is that right, Alex? Yeah. So I hope you'll get to kind of read this, because there's just so much out there. Some of the things that really struck me reading this book was around in this book, as Alex writes about his early days when he started volunteering, working for results, much before Grameen Foundation was set up, and how working on small things like working on lobbying with the lawmakers for a law which would bring more government aid into supporting micro enterprise programs. How those small initiatives that work in very early days of Alex's career kind of may have had a profound impact in how microcredit movement kind of emerged from that initiative. And of course, building on the very, very successful work of Professor Yunus and Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, and how it may have become one of the largest movement around impact making and helping the poor people and women around the world. Just so many millions, hundreds of millions of people have been touched by this. And if you go to the heart of it, somewhere one sees that those small but audacious steps taken by Alex in his early days, as captured in the book, those may have played some really catalytic role in making those things happen. Of course, in the book, there are just so many snippets around leading, learning, communicating, storytelling, partnerships, managing one's own life, while running from crisis to crisis, as we see happening in our world every single day, and remaining sane, remaining hopeful, all of that. There's just so much to learn. So let me kind of dive into this chat, and ask Alex to reflect on some of the things that Alex would like to highlight as an author of the book. So Alex, there's all 300 pages of book. There is something out there worth paying attention to, worth learning from. So if I had to ask you that, out of all so many useful things that you write about in the books, so many useful insights, if you had to pick out the most important ones that would have helped you becoming the person you are, being the leader you are, being the change maker you have been, what would be some of those insights, Alex, if you can highlight some of them, and then we can go into some of those in more detail. Thank you.
Sure. Well, thank you, Prabhat. Thank you, Royston. Both of you great leaders of the kind of the wide and Grameen network of organizations who I've gotten to know and admire over the years. And I want to thank all of you for joining today. Whether you're involved in serving society through a Grameen organization, whether you served with me or you serve now that I've kind of moved on from the scene, except as a supporter and friend, whether you're serving society in other ways. I just really appreciate the work that you're doing. I hope this book and this webinar are helpful to you in some way. And thank you also for those of you who've supported my book, which is really meant to be my gift to the next generation of change makers who will hopefully exceed everything that I and my generation have done. Prabhat, I think the biggest single thing, we can talk about the new material in this edition around crisis management, hopefully as the hour goes on. But I think the biggest single thing that I learned, and I talk about it, I have an extended kind of little part about this in my original author talk when I launched the first edition of this book, which I've kind of stopped giving because I got tired of giving it, even though I really like it, is around how one relates to one's mistakes and the mistakes made around you. In social change, we're trying to deal with some of the very difficult problems that are either caused by, or at least certainly not solved by, the other sectors of society: government, religion, business. So what's left over is kind of given to us. And these are hard problems, as Warren Buffett said in a very humble and wise statement when he was making his big grant to the Gates Foundation. He said, let's not underestimate what these groups are trying to do. They're really some of the toughest problems of society that get worse when there are crises like what we have right now. So early in my career, whenever I made a mistake, whenever a colleague made a mistake, I felt the loss to our change-making agenda, and I become very, I point fingers often at myself, sometimes at others, sadly, become very angry, become very resentful, and it would make the situation so much worse. I didn't realize it at the time. It sounds obvious, perhaps. And it would have people start looking for other jobs if they were working for me. It would have people not want to take risks in the future, would want to deflect blame, and so that no one could really understand what went wrong. People were trying to do is make sure people thought they weren't responsible. And somewhere in the kind of history of Grameen Foundation, I just tried a couple new things. I wish I could say it was more planful or strategic, but I just tried to start relating to mistakes, errors in a different way, in a way where there was little or no blame, where it was all a learning experiment. And I kind of used myself as an example, and I would tell my staff about all the mistakes that I'd made and what they cost the organization. And I kind of told them, you'll never catch up to me. I'm the world, the leader, like the greatest of all time of Grameen Foundation of making mistakes that harm our mission. But I've also, in the process, I've also done a lot of things to advance our mission, and the two are really linked. And so and I tell the story in the book. I won't go into it, but how that when we started shifting the culture around how you relate to mistakes, it influenced how Bill Gates thought about us, and a very influential trip he took to Ghana. It influenced how my staff would write about their experiences and lessons learned. We were very open with publishing our own mistakes so that other organizations could learn. And so that, having that grace and wisdom to see that mistake making is a part and parcel of tackling these difficult problems. And if you can take out the blame and mine for lessons learned, and have some grace for yourself and your colleagues, it just, things work so much better. And so that was, if I had to, maybe if you asked me tomorrow, Prabhat, I would talk about some other one of those big themes. But that for me, without that, I would have burned out in my 30s. And I would be and I'd still be, blaming whatever it was that I thought drove me out of that job, my dream job. And it would have really been me and my inability to relate constructively to the inevitable mistakes and foibles and miscues that happen in trying to bring, big social change.
Thanks, Alex. That's such a powerful thing. And of course, that can only come, after one has been in the field long enough to be able to make the mistakes and learn from them. Be able to say that, yes, I made a mistake, and this is what I learned. In your book, Alex, you also talk about experience around when you were organizing this results chapter in Cornell,
Yeah.
back to university days, and you write a sentence that struck to me. You say that plausibility that individual actions could add up to big changes. Activists who are powerfully connected to a well-coordinated network can feed on each other's wins and learnings. And as I reflect on how this whole microcredit movement kind of shaped up over last 3 or 4 decades, I can very well see that happening. Can you kind of talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, this was one of the insights of early in my career. I'm glad you picked up on it, Prabhat, and I haven't really thought about it for a while, so you'll forgive me if I'm a little scattered. But the brilliance, early in my life, I came under the influence of some very outstanding social entrepreneurs. Muhammad Yunus one, but there's a guy named Sam Daly Harris was another, and he had this insight around political organizing for social change and for ending poverty. And basically, you could read a book and then it could say that their policies, and I'm reading a book right now about all of the problems in kind of the whole history and particularly modern history of food production, and how it really has been harmful to the environment, harmful to human health in so many ways. And I could, I'm about to finish it, and I just want to, I could imagine writing 2 or 3 letters to my congressman or to the local media about what I learned and what I think society should do. But then it just kind of, it fades away because there's no follow-up, there's no network, there's no concerted effort to make those changes. And what Sam did is he connected all these people who saw that the persistence of poverty and hunger was the result of a lack of political will. And he said, let's form a growing network of people. They made some major changes just when that network was about 200 or 300 people across the United States. And by acting in that coordinated way, you really start to feel that you're not just kind of, it's a drop in the ocean, maybe a helpful drop in the ocean, but still that just something that could actually be sustained and make big changes, or at least medium-sized changes, and medium-sized changes can grow to something bigger. So that was a real deep insight. I probably couldn't have articulated it that well at the time, but that power of being part of a team that I would write my congressman today, and someone in Kansas City would write him tomorrow, and and in the accumulation of that, real change is possible, not a given, but possible. And you start to get an excitement. I remember thinking, how could we start a results chapter in every congressional district in the country, which is finally now many years later, getting closer to reality. Because I just said, God, we're big, but we should be bigger, and the changes can be bigger. And that was the whole insight of the Microcredit Summit, which Grameen was a big part of. I was a big part of, which was, okay, it's one thing to say, I want to start a microcredit program in 10 villages in India or Bangladesh, and that's good. But if you can feel part of a global movement that's trying to reach 100 million of the world's poorest, and again, I'll reach that threshold in my 10 villages, but I know that there are people that are coordinated loosely, that are trying to replicate my success in their area. Then you really get to the possibility of global change in a very decentralized way, where you have this loose team that you're part of, and so you focus on your area, whether you define your area as all of India or 10 villages in India or the south side of Chicago, but you know that there are other people that are carrying that torch in other places, and there are ways to connect with them, with technology now making it so much easier, learn from them, draw strength from them, and that creates the possibility of decentralized activity, but aggregating to big global change. Again, it might take 5 or 10 or 15 years, but few things that are meaningful, take shorter than that in my experience.
Yeah, I mean, in the current, like COVID scenario, we are seeing, when the health system and every other system has been falling apart, it has been people's networks, who have been kind of, organizing, getting together to kind of, solving the crisis. And that's kind of, really helped, if we look at what has been happening in India in last few weeks. And of course, I think that's the experience, around the world as well. And it's the power of networks, a lot of people believing in a common cause, which kind of can change things. In the book, you also write about starting at results as the legislative director at the age of 22, and you write about being woefully underprepared for the job.
Yeah.
And you also very candidly write about how faking a sense of confidence was necessary at that time. But from that person, who had to fake a sense of confidence, to transition into a person who really knows and understands things, who can go to the roots of issues, advocate passionately about the issues you care about, with authority and with authenticity. I think it'll be great if you can reflect on this transition.
Yeah, well, I think that early in my career, and I really hope we can bring in Happy and others into this conversation in the second half of the hour on some of these issues. Oh, and I need to keep bringing people in from the waiting room here, some latecomers. I had the good fortune, I guess you could say, of early in my career 3 times having opportunities presented to me that felt way outside of my competency, and I think back to those times, one of which was being the legislative director of results, one of which was writing a book for a major publisher about Grameen, the first book to be published on Grameen in a mainstream kind of Western by publisher, and then getting Grameen Foundation. And each time, I kind of said, I have an ambition here. I have an opportunity. Opportunities don't come by that often. And I just need to give it my all. And even though I go to bed each night thinking, how am I going to be equal to what I have to do tomorrow? In several, some of the work I did, I just felt I could do, but a lot of it I felt I couldn't. And you just learn in that process to, fake a sense of confidence at times, adopt mentors where you don't have to fake it with them, where you can actually ask them for help, learn to have grace for yourself when you slip up, as I mentioned earlier, and just try to make sure that none of your errors are kind of are mortal, that they don't endanger your organization or your reputation. or your key relationship so much you can't recover. And then you just kind of muddle through. And by the third time I did that, leading Grameen Foundation, again, I almost came off the rails. And as I talk about in the book, around 3 years into my dream job. But then, like third time is a charm. And then I finally started to kind of get my sea legs and get some confidence that was not faked confidence, but was, a degree of real confidence. And I realized that I was able to, at that time, helped by the Grameen brand for sure, as you and Royston have been, to attract people around me who could fill in some of my gaps, who could do some of the work that I didn't have time or the ability to do. And it all started to come together. But it was really a 15-year period, a 12, 13-year period where, I just had to take on things that were bigger than me and survive. Certainly make some positive impact. I don't want to, but just survive and learn and get to that point where I could, with a reasonable amount of confidence and skill, start to go on offense rather than play defense as a social change agent. But and part of it is just having that self-confidence and having a great wife and a strong family support that I could, feel like I could go out there and play and lose and still be okay at the end of the day. And that was certainly a kind of a blessing that I had that I know not everyone enjoys, but that ability to take the risk, to do things you're not prepared for and to give it your all. And then just, whatever the result is, then just take the learning. I have many flaws then and now, but that was one thing that I was willing to do. And it served me. And I think, I served some of the organizations I was associated with well.
Right, Alex. There's just so many things in the book, about which I would really like to discuss, but there's some very simple things that I thought, I'll touch upon. One of which was, of course, we know that, you run a marathon every year to raise funds for Grameen, and that's something you picked up, quite late in the day. In the book, you also write about, your habit of, picking up, garbage on your way to office, in
Yeah.
early days. And then you kind of, left that for a while and then again, kind of restarted. And then, you write about this, snippet that periodically inventorying your success strategies provides opportunities for reviving positive habits that may have fallen into disuse. So how these small things, you see making them shaping up an individual and, making them effective. Let's say whether it is about a health routine that one follows, or this example that you go in the book.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all in different ways. We're all conducting experiments, whether it's conscious or not, about what makes us productive, what makes us happy, what makes us fulfilled, what gives us meaning. But I think I may have done that a little bit more in a little more structured way than some others. Again, part of it is some of the privilege I was brought into. There were certain things I didn't have to worry about or didn't have to worry about much. I certainly don't want to minimize that. And so yes, there were certain habits that I developed kind of almost absentmindedly. And I remember when I was working for results in the early 90s, I remember that there were times where either the work was frustrating or the work was kind of abstract. When you're lobbying to change World Bank policies or move $100 million in the US budget into something more productive, even if you're successful, the results aren't really that visible to you. So it's still, even when you're successful, it's abstract. And so I didn't feel that, when you do something, when you build low-income housing for people in your community and 100 families move in that were homeless before, that's very visible, but that kind of work wasn't even when it was successful. So I just developed this habit, which is on the 3-block walk to work, I would just pick up some garbage on the street. And when I passed a trash can, put it in. So I said, I don't know if I made any impact today in my work, but I know that street that I walked down is a little cleaner. And it was funny because a friend of mine who was a roommate at the time started like mimicking me, and I saw that, wow, those, you do something like that, something that might look weird to some people, but others, you influence them. And then I gave that up for a long time. And you're right, I picked it up again because this jogging trail where I live is lots of people drop, garbage. And I just started picking it up, and I started learning where the trash cans were on this, 6-mile route. And so I would pick it up as I got within, a few hundred yards of it mostly. And so the process of writing this book, and the revised edition also, and I really encourage people, you don't necessarily need to write a whole book, though some of you may have a book in you, even a better book than this. But that process of kind of cataloging, looking at your life and looking at what you've learned, what works, what has sabotaged yourself, what has empowered yourself. And one of the things I found was old habits, old practices, old techniques, old meditations, old prayers, that I just said, wow, that really worked. Why did I stop that? Let's bring that back. And so doing that kind of inventory, that kind of reflection, I did it with a book. Sometimes people might do it with a friend or a spouse. You'll find some golden nuggets, and some of them may be management techniques. I learned from a guy that some of you know, Royston will probably remember, Norm Tanina, and he said, when you're scheduling meetings, people tend to schedule them, for a half hour, an hour, and then the next one begins right after. He said, why don't you just schedule all your meetings for 15 or 45 minutes or an hour and 15 minutes? So you always have 15 minutes to recover before the next meeting, which will normally begin on the half hour or the hour. And I'm like, that's a really good idea. And I started that again recently. So there are a lot of 45-minute meetings on my calendar these days. And it just, that 15 minutes to just recover and make some notes and process whatever happened is just a good technique. And I stopped doing it and I started doing it again. And I think we all have those. And it's just an interesting discipline to go back and look for those greatest hits from one's youth and see which might serve you now. And that's what I tried to do and model. And I tried to write about that, my specific examples of that in the book.
Right, Alex. Should we, I have, lots of questions and things that we can talk about from the book. But I was thinking, should we move to, some Q&A from the audience?
We can give you one last question, and then we can turn over to the audience, Prabhat. So you pick your favorite one from what's left.
Yeah, and certainly, even if you haven't read the first edition of the book, much less the second edition, if just some of these themes are interesting to you, you want to ask a question or share your own experience, we would welcome that. But any final question, Royston or Prabhat, before we open it up? Anything?
I do have, one question I would like to touch upon, unless Royston, you want to ask something.
Go ahead.
All right. Okay. So, Alex, in your book, you also, write about this experience from 2011. The first social business day in Bangladesh, and we were all prepared to go on a stage and with perhaps a prepared speech in English, and suddenly Professor Yunus asks you to speak in Bengali, which of course you used to speak long ago, but may not be up to speed at that time, after a gap of so many years. And then you kind of decided to deliver in Bengali anyway, even though you're not prepared, and for which you actually ended up getting a compliment from Lamia subsequently.
Yeah.
And you kind of conclude on this episode in the book by saying that being impressive does not necessarily mean being perfect. Would you like to kind of talk about this?
I remember I was once joking, and I said about one of my colleagues, I said I wanted to beat the perfectionist out of her, but not all of one, because there's perfectionism has its place in and sometimes perfectionism will drive you to not engage in something that you're likely to be less than perfect at, and sometimes that's the right move. But what I kind of started to see in that example is when I was ready to give a good presentation in English, and my Bengali was out of practice, and I was asked to do it. And I just said, sometimes in order to rise to the moment, to do something imperfectly, and is usually the right move. And I think actually some major supporters and donors, they want to see you. How do you react when you're thrown a curveball? Because that's inevitable in the kind of work we do. And so, so I got up there and I said what I was going to say in Bengali, and I sat down immediately. Those of you who have second or third languages, when you're not prepared, you say, "Oh, it would have been such a more natural phrase in Bengali to say this than that what I actually said." But the time is gone because it doesn't come in, and sometimes you even do that in your own mother tongue. And so I guess the lesson there that I was trying to make in that section is that perfectionism has its place, but sometimes, because I could have just said, "Oh, Professor Yunus, I can't do this. Please let me speak in English because I can't do it perfectly." But I would have, robbed the reason he asked me is that there were a small but important group in that audience who didn't understand English. And I would have, and then everyone who's bilingual just thought it was so cool that an American was speaking Bengali imperfectly. And so I just would have robbed that moment, which was so much fun for so many people, a little stressful for me. I would have just taken that away because I was worried about it being imperfect. And yet, that's when you're willing to just roll the dice, even if you're a little underprepared, even if you're throwing a curveball. Sometimes that's the strongest message you can have to a stakeholder, that you're going to be a reliable partner in an uncertain world, if you're willing to take that risk. And so that was it was kind of emblematic for me. Not that it was a major deal in world history that I spoke my second language imperfectly, but it was about a larger issue that I hoped would be meaningful for some people.
We just had the West Bengal election, so if we were going to be asking you and inviting you to campaign, maybe we could have used some of that there, but too late for that next time around. So thank you so much, Prabhat. I think it was a great set of interaction, and Alex, as always, such thoughtful and sincere responses. But I would like, as you rightly said, to maybe pull in some of the others on the group. So Happy, can I sort of throw a curveball at you and ask you to speak in Bengali, or at least in English, and share maybe something in Alex's book or in your sort of working relationship with Alex that you saw evolve as a trait over the years of engaging with him and Grameen Foundation?
Okay. During my time in Grameen Foundation was a kind of transition as well in terms of Alex's role, because that was a time when, as CEO, he really had to focus more on promoting the mission, building the partnerships, establishing the revenue streams, and had to bring in a new structure where there is a separate person kind of overseeing operations day to day. Personally, I found that a bit tragic for me, in part because I really wanted to spend a lot more time kind of learning from the way Alex handled situations and handled people. Because Alex is a dispenser of tough love. In one of my first meetings with him, when I took on greater responsibility in Grameen Foundation, he basically said, "Happy, I appreciate how you're good at analyzing problems, but you really need to spend a bit more time thinking of the solutions." And I said, okay, my boss just told me to think of solutions and more solutions. So, but it really stuck with me because it helped me become a stronger leader myself, because it was really more about setting standards for your colleagues. And because those standards were set, the overall efficacy of the organization increases tremendously, right? It's good if we have one of these individual strengths, but to really grow and take on more responsibility, I think that was the kind of ongoing challenge he gave us. And the second one that I recall was when I took on Jennifer's role, which are very difficult shoes to fill, Alex said, as soon as possible, try to find your, oh my God, I'm going to mess up the exact phrase he gave. The metaphor was that of an airplane and altitude, cruising. Alex, thank you. Okay, cruising altitude. He said, find your cruising altitude, because don't try to be everything for everybody. Don't try to solve everything up front, right? You have to be there, you know, showing up is half the battle, and you have to show up for the long haul, right? Don't try to spend all of your energy trying to perfect one particular aspect of the work. Find your cruising altitude and make sure you have a good team, because you can't have some parts on autopilot or things you pay less attention to unless you trust people who will be able to take on those responsibilities. So that was something that I've taken on myself in my work. I've actually used Alex cruising altitude on a lot of other people, even the younger Grameen Foundation folks. But really, it's more about building a strong team, and once you pick the right people, make sure you trust them, so that you are at the same time looking out for each other, but not necessarily taking on the work of another person. So that ability to judge the right people, who gets on the bus, who gets off the bus, and when. I think those are very critical things I've learned. So.
Thank you so much for that, Happy. I mean, tough love, cruising altitude. I mean, there's a lot of real nuggets there. And for those who don't know Happy, who we call Happy, is Christopher Tan, incredible leader, ran the Grameen Foundation Philippines program, then ran the Asia program, played a pivotal role in the global strategy of Grameen Foundation. An incredible heart, incredible mind, and a dear friend. So Happy, thank you for that. And, really, really great insights there. But we already have a couple of questions. So what I'm going to do is request you to turn on your mic, unmute yourself, and ask it so that we hear a different voice rather than me reading it out for Alex. So we take the Grameen Foundation one first, and then the Colored Cow Consulting one. Sorry, I'm going with the names that are on your tag, but go ahead.
Hi, Ashir here. So I'm actually logged down from the account of Grameen Foundation. Sorry. So the question I have is that the set of challenges that accompany designing and delivering initiatives that traditionally push the boundaries and basically through innovations, they are large and numerous. And how is it that we go about effectively communicating these innovations and initiatives to both internal stakeholders, that is within the organization, your teams, and across other functions that directly or indirectly contribute to that initiative, as well as external stakeholders that do include the very people that we wish to impact. So just wanted to know your thoughts on this. Thank you.
Sure, it's a great question. I'm not sure I have the best answer, but so I'll try not to go too on. I also want to just say I've seen Grameen Foundation India. You mentioned it. Just want to reiterate what Prabhat and Royston said, that this COVID crisis in India is just so horrifying. I know many of you have come in from India. I so appreciate you joining despite what's going on. I hear about people losing relatives almost on a daily basis in India. I applaud those who are trying to deal with this crisis institutionally or individually. And again, I thank you for joining. One of the things I learned, I saw Sam Daly Harris early in my career promote this, what we now call microcredit and microfinance. It was kind of a new ish idea. He wanted to make it much bigger. Then I later saw, Professor Yunus promote his version of that as it got popular. I saw ideas like impact investing and blurring the for-profit, nonprofit wall, things like Royston did. And one of the things is, if you're going to promote innovation, you're going to promote something new. One of the things, and you're going to communicate about it, I think there's a tendency to kind of become afraid of your own shadow, because critics are going to come. Some critics may be there because your idea isn't that good, but more likely people are used to what they're comfortable with, what they recognize, and the incomprehension of new ideas just leads many potential allies to initially be opposed. And if you're trying to just make everyone happy internally and externally with new ideas, you're never going to bring anything to market. And in the nonprofit and mission-driven community, we tend to be even more drawn to consensus and not being decisive than in other sectors. And I just learned that if you're bringing a non-traditional idea forward, first of all, don't fall in love with your idea so much that you won't see its flaws when they're pointed out to you or when you observe them. But also realize that if it's a very sound and bold and important idea, it's going to have critics, some of them people you admire. And you just need to kind of keep pushing forward and not be so afraid of that. And I've gotten involved in the environmental movement right now. And one of the things I find is that there are new ideas out there that could help on the climate crisis, that just there are people that are kind of ideologically opposed to, and the environmental activists. And some of those ideas are actually worthwhile, worth trying, make sense. But people just got kind of sold a bill of goods a long time ago that anything that looks and sounds like that is bad and should be dismissed out of hand. And these are good people that care about climate change, but they've kind of closed their minds in some ways. And so if you're going to bring a new idea out there, you're going to have internal and external critics. Listen to them, but don't be frightened by them. Don't become afraid of your shadow. Don't chase your tail. Bring it out, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But if you don't try, you'll never know, and the world may lose as a result. So anyway, I hope I answered your question to some degree helpfully, and it's a really good question. If others have answers to it, please, and maybe we'll hear from some of the others who've raised their hands.
Thank you, Alex, for that. Howard Cow Consulting. Sorry, I don't know how to address you, but I'm sure you'll introduce
I'm sorry.
yourself.
I'm Abhishek. Somehow I got logged in from that organization account. Zoom keeps doing that. Awesome. So I had a question. I actually about a year back I started this journey. We're basically building a tech solution for the nonprofits, but it requires bringing in a lot of the NGOs together. So because we want to leverage the work that they're doing and empower them to do it with a lot more force and a lot more efficiency and a lot more just to give them the support needed in tech area. Now, for me, I think it's really, really important to bring in and unite their forces. So my question to you is, how do I sort of form this partnership? How do I, how do I approach NGOs to bring them in this umbrella of application and, to unite the forces so that we can attack singularly for a lot of social change that they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to answer you, but I'm going to put an article in the chat. Oh, nuts. Give me just a second here. There we go. So the nonprofit, the mission-driven world, to be a little more inclusive, has a lot going for it, right? I mean, it's where I've spent most of my career. But it, like every community, every network, every culture, it has its things that are kind of deformed. And one of the things in the mission-driven sector that I've been, and I can't say that I've totally avoided these traps myself, is the tendency to think about think in zero-sum terms. So one of the things that hobbles people in fundraising is they think about fundraising as is a zero-sum transaction. Either the donor wins, they say no, or they lose, they say yes, and that the amount of money is fixed. It either ends up in my pocket as the fundraiser or the donor's pocket. It stays there. And I talk about it in what some people call the best chapters in the book, chapter 7, followed by chapter 8, which is kind of a follow-up to it, that there's a whole other way to think about fundraising. And in the same way, nonprofits often, they're feeling so vulnerable, especially in times like these, but even in better times, that they just, all they can think about is what is good for their organization, right? And if I have a competitor who's a similar thing, if something bad happens to them, it's almost like I think that's good for me, even though we're all trying to make the same change together. And it should be that their victory is a kind of a somewhat of a victory for me. But we think about how can my organization survive, and anything that doesn't play into that. And yet we were created not to have our organization survive, but to actually change society. But we understand the pressure of paying salaries and making payroll and having your boards not be hostile to you and all these things, and getting good media and avoiding bad media. So the tendency is, people say, well, let's all come together as a group of nonprofits and try to do something that none of us could do alone together, right? That's kind of what you're saying. And it took me 3 years, but I launched a coalition of India-focused nonprofits, and the article that culminated in that I just put in the chat. And I said we try to avoid the tendency of nonprofits to engage in a kind of a circular firing squad, where we all are kind of taking aim at each other, but others are taking aim at us, and we're forgetting who the real enemy is. Actually, someone once referenced that article, and they said, "Oh, you're the circular firing squad guy." I said, "Well, no, that's not exactly how I want to be known, but anyway, yes, I did use that phrase." And yet, what I found, and hopefully that article will be helpful to you, is if you kind of persist long enough. And it helps if economic times are good, and good economic times, I think, are coming back globally. It's going to take another year or two. You can slowly convince a small group of people that by doing something together, they may have some benefits even to their organization, but even more to the larger community and to the cause and to the big picture mission. And don't be too picky, and be opportunistic. And if there are 15 groups you're trying to get to collaborate, celebrate if you can get 3 or 4 or 5 of them to start with. And then, slowly that example may attract others, even people who are implacably opposed to what you were doing, because they just, their self-interest calculation may change. And there's a great article also in the Stanford Social Innovation Review about collective impact as opposed to isolated impact. And that has changed a lot of minds. We think what we did in India here is kind of a variation on that theme. So realize you're up against something, even though it's so obvious to you that collaboration is going to benefit everyone down the road. People can't see it unless you've been on the hot seat running a mission-driven organization. You can't understand maybe the pressure you're under, but then try to slowly coax them into it. It won't be everyone. They won't be completely committed to it at first, but if you stick with it, and if you really do have a value proposition for the whole group, they'll come. It just won't be as fast as you'd want, but it will, in my experience, it will come if you kind of stick with it. And if you're doing it for the right reasons, and you're not manipulative, and you're not kind of talking about how organizations are so narrow-minded, even if they are, you don't want to put people in a defensive posture. It's tempting. And you'll get there, but be patient. I'm not the world's most patient person, but I've had to learn a measure of it to work in these kind of coalition type of or kind of collective impact type of models. Thanks for the good question.
We had
it makes sense.
Thank you so much, Aditya. Did you have a question or?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay.
Well,
Lisa, can we turn over to you, maybe for a few comments?
Who were you inviting, Royston? Sorry.
is that Lisa who's joined in from the
Oh
US?
yeah, Lisa Merritt. Hey, yeah, we've been it's been an overly male dominated process so far, and I know you from a very different part of my life. Lisa, anything to say?
I'm really not, I feel out of my league in this conversation, to be quite honest. So, I've read your book and I've been to many of your sessions before. So if it's okay, I'm going to bow out of asking a question just because I do feel a little out of my league, but I appreciate the opportunity, and it's great to see you, Alex, and everybody here. And it's always great to learn new things. I work in a different field, but I always like to expand my horizons and listen to hear what's going on in other areas around the world. So thank you for the opportunity. I will bow out.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here with us, and thank you for that humility. Sometimes in the social sector, we'd like to say that we know everything about everything. And, it's always humbling to learn that it's fine to say, we're out of our depth. But
I will say,
I just want to.
I was going to say one
ahead.
thing. That is the one thing that I've learned in my life is I should always say I don't know the answer if I don't know the answer.
Okay. Well, Royston, maybe you can wrap up. Let me just, if you give me 30 seconds to run through a couple slides here. And maybe I'll share these with the group. So this is a little slide about the new book, and we've been talking about it, so I won't. This is another book that I wrote, a kind of a simpler treatment, more breadth, not as much depth in some of my lessons learned, and it's also out there on Amazon. And then here's someone's trying to get back in here. Here are some links in terms of buying the books, including the new edition. And then I have a lot of content on, free content out there that just trying to kind of share some of my lessons, hopefully be useful to folks. I'm going to put this in the chat, and I'm going to also, I think, try to email it to you all. But Royston, why don't you just bring us home?
I'll do that, but I would request if you can keep the last slide on, because it's just those who want to take screenshots or other things, maybe easier than copying it from the chat. But thank you so much. I mean, I want to just sort of say how amazing it is to see you again, Alex, to hear you and continue to be so inspiring and sincere and thoughtful. Thanks to all of you who made it possible to be here on this call, and it's a pleasure to see this bright spot, as I said today. India is struggling in dark clouds, and Mumbai even darker. Happy is looking at the sky. In Manila time, it has been fairly late in the evening, but it is still, that ray of hope that Alex's book gives us. Would like to encourage each one of you to, get hold of a copy. I don't know when Alex is going to travel next and autograph it for you, but I'm sure he will when he's in your town or in your city. But it is something that has helped me, and the guidance of practical advice, practical tips that Alex has shared with us is really useful. So make sure you've taken a screenshot of this or copied the Amazon link to the book, because there is much to learn from each other, to grow from learning from each other, and the world needs to build back better, cleaner, greener, and more inclusive. And I'm sure that we can build that world without losing our mind. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Alex. Alex, any last words?
No, I appreciate all of you for being here today, and especially Prabhat and Royston, great leaders in a great country of India that I've come to love, going through a difficult period. And each and every one of you for the work you're doing to try to make society better, to advance Grameen ideals or other worthy ideals. I appreciate it. Stay in touch. Send me feedback on the book, the new edition, the first edition. Review it online. It really helps, especially on Amazon or other platforms. And have a great evening, great day, whichever time zone you're in. And thanks so much for taking part.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
See you. Bye.
Bye.